Yo, what's up, my fellow spiritual people who are searching and learning on this giant, adventurous journey we are on? So, I found this awesome person on TikTok. 360 the Alchemist, the 360 Alchemist, 360 the Alchemist, 360 the Alchemist. He is also very spiritual and on this level, trying to learn, trying to elevate through the planes, whatever you call it. Anyway, he was talking some really awesome stuff on a TikTok live, and I cash apped him a donation, $25. He sent me this PDF right here, and it has like 50 books, 50 amazing books. Here is the first one we're going to start with. I feel like it's a good intro. It's called Incense by Leo Vinci. Its ritual, significance, use, and preparation. Perfumes, essences, and anointing oils. All right. Incense has fascinated men for centuries and is an essential part of many ceremonies and rites. Here is a complete guide to making and using your own incense, giving details of its historical background and providing practical formulas for personal and group rituals. Incense, its ritual, significance, preparation, and use, by Leo Vinci. Illustrations by Roger L. Fitzpatrick. Alright, do we skip the intro? Let's just get it a little bit, because it's going to tell us what a reader can expect from this book. Primarily, the knowledge is making and using incense. Nothing has captivated mankind more than this fascinating and bewitching practice, even if only pursued for just making nice smells. We find its use in the ceremonies and rites of the Christians, pagans, Hindus, Buddhists, and others, for they have all delighted in its odoriferous perfumes and smokes, and time may have even strengthened its enchanting allure. Many things have been used in the composition of incense: gums, resins, woods, and barks, oils, and even hallucinatory drugs, of which more later. First, we will take a brief look at its use down the centuries and some of the ways in which earlier civilizations have regarded and used it. Alright, next we touched upon perfumes, flower oils, and anointing oils. Awesome. Alright, so page 11. We like that. Correct preparation. The ritualist is in a similar position in that they must prepare the area or space and provide a suitable atmosphere. It is not done for them. First, you define the area or space to be occupied or worked in. This is usually your temple, magic circle, or the room you are using. If working outside, you can define your area with, say, 4 large stones, perhaps of distinctive shape, at the 4 cardinal points of the compass. They do not need to be special. Having defined your area, you then create the atmosphere by the appropriate ritual and or incenses. Burning the appropriate incense, among other things, is a form of protocol, which is given according to rank or situation, or station. Thus, the higher the rank, the greater the protocol required. This is also why I said at the outset that you cannot prepare your area or space for one element if you are working by invocation for another. Incense is a very subtle substance which vibrates on many planes of existence. By the use of appropriate ingredients, the fine particles of incense smoke in the air can act as a point of contact or support for the finer elements which vibrate at a higher rate. The prime thing to remember is that it is we who do the preparation. There is often great disappointment in store for the beginner who assumes that just because they have burnt some incense, sensed everything in sight, and recited a few conjurations, a spirit or power will appear. If you decide to try to contact a spirit or power, you must first create an atmosphere and area which is agreeable to it. You would not enter or stay in a room that was unpleasant or in which you could not breathe. Why should they? Incense, then, plays a very important part in the performance of rituals. The incense problem in Christian worship was a highly emotive and controversial issue in the latter half of the 19th century. We may regard the matter as somewhat ridiculous and a storm in a teacup affair today, but great passions were roused and still can be. As other writers have rightly observed, incense is a unique and strange phenomenon, for it assails you not only on a physical level, but also on a psychological one, and may even be somewhat addictive in habit, according to personal temperament. Yet, a candlelit church or temple, a combination of choir and organ, in solemn music, ritual, and regula, stained glass windows, thurible wafting, the sweet smoke of incense, all exercise in atavistic and inexplicable power. A cautionary note. The old magicians were most popular to have the appropriate incense or suffumigations when they were working on any specific purpose. They also took great care to see that the correct ingredients appropriate to the planet or constellation under which they were working were used or combined. It was their belief that the correct odors and had the power to attract the planetary spirits or powers. Early writings also credited certain perfumes with the power to gather together, while others had the power to drive away. Many incense were said to be active and thus are commanding, and these were used by many magicians and occultists who worked under will. Some incense are of the passive type, and this type has the effect of making a person open and hence a channel for the forces to use as far as invoking good forces is concerned. It is the channel which must be uncontaminated, else the force will not manifest in its purest form. Hence, the danger of invoking a Mars force by a person with, say, an inordinately bad temper, for which a person would be more likely to respond to a negative, destructive side of the force rather than the constructive or positive. This is why many teachers, schools, and groups subscribe to the traditional view that rigorous character training should ideally precede any major occult work. Further, who but an idiot or practitioner of the left-hand path would wish to serve as a channel for forces whose very nature is contaminating? Hallucinatory additives. It is for this reason that I am unhappy about any additives to incense that may be the cause of hallucinations. While some may consider it fun to try it, be rejected by all but the most experienced occultist. The inclusion of ingredients of a narcotic or illusory nature may give more than you bargained for, especially if these added to an incense used in a group working this practice, especially if done without the knowledge and consent of others, to be frowned upon. A practice definitely to be frowned upon. It may quite often show up a weak link in the chain of the group, perhaps one you did not even know existed. Books written on the subject of the black arts and other sensationalist works often advocate the use of narcotic or hallucinatory ingredients, but their suggested formulas invariably fail to invoke the force or spirit expected by the aspirant, and succeeds instead, if it can be called success, in merely attracting those involved and usually unhygienic spirits of elementals which delight and thrive in the atmosphere created by the drug-inspired confusion of the well-meaning but inept amateur. Through they exist and are used, it is for the reason that certain types of incense have been omitted from this book. The use of narcotic and hallucinogenic additives tend to be addictive. A small amount added to the beginning will slowly increase as tolerance increases. Thus, dependency on the additive will likewise be increased, but not only acquired ability as a result of its use. It has to be admitted that history has numerous recorded examples of the use of narcotic additives with seemingly excellent results. But it has to be remembered that the people who were subjected to these intoxicating effects were highly trained in these matters and under the guidance of temples and crane schools, and further, that they are chosen because of their stability for this particular facet of the occult arts. Gaining your occult ability the hard way may be slow and very frustrating, but it is lasting. The only way in the end is to who it out for yourself. Anything which may endanger the health of the magician, occultist, should be eschewed, especially as regards health on levels other than the physical. There is little point to trying to keep a physical vehicle in the best shape we can if the driver is drunk. Disorder, or at the worst, disaster, may prove to be the likely result of such practices. Chapter 1. The historical background. Egyptian. The Egyptians were great practitioners in the manufacture and use of incense. and they brought the compounding of their incense to a very high art. Many of their ideas regarding incense share a common basis with those of other people and their beliefs as well as will be seen. Perhaps the most famous of all the Egyptians' incense is Kaifi. Sometimes Kaifi. I don't know. This is a most elaborate compound of ingredients and its manufacturer was itself a very special temple rite and a most secret one. It is said to be most beneficial in its manner. The incense has 16 ingredients, which is a square out of a square. The ingredients being things that delight in the night. It has the power to lull people to sleep, brighten the dreams, and loosen the tensions of daily anxiety by bringing calm and quiet to all who breathed it. The ingredients were mixed to a secret ritual to the accompaniment of chanting of sacred text. It had the mysterious significance of harmony and order. Frankincense. I was waiting for that word. One of the ingredients of Kaifi is the ever popular frankincense. As with all other nations of the world up to the present day, the Egyptians valued frankincense very highly. To obtain this very valuable commodity, they organized expeditions to the land of Punt, as this was the area where the frankincense was chiefly gathered. It is a gum resin of a tree of the Boswellia family. The land of Punt was on the hinterland of the Somali coast of East Africa. Pliny refers to frankincense as one of the products of Arabia, saying that the Sabaiya alone, behold the tree which produces frankincense, and of these only 3,000 families by virtue of hereditary succession. The trees were considered sacred, and while pruning them or gathering the resin, the men must be free from pollution by sexual intercourse or contact with the dead. Herodotus waxes more lyrical and claims that winged serpents guard the trees and have been driven off by the burning of storax. When harvested, it was carried to Sabota, where the priests claimed a titty of the frankincense in honor of their god Sabis, and until this was paid, none of it could be disposed of, as frankincense was the gum of what was regarded as a holy species of tree, and the gum was collected with religious precautions. Perhaps it was thought to possess an intrinsic virtue like the gum of the Samoria tree, the idea being that it was the blood of an animate and divine plant. Plutarch gives a list of 16 ingredients that were used in the preparation of this most sacred of the Egyptian incense: honey, wine, raisins, sweet rush resin, myrrh, frankincense, cicalis, calamus, asphalt, thyron, dock. Both kinds of acruthals, carmine, and orris root. It has to be admitted, however, that a great many formulas for Kaifi exist. Sir Wallace Budge, for example, gives chet oil as one of the ingredients. odors of the gods. The Egyptian gods in keeping with other beliefs right up to the present day, were said to have a wonderful odor. Today we call this the odor of sancticity. Some even claiming that many good people who have been canonized have displayed the sweet odor in death to those whom he loves. Osiris transfers his odors, as did Isis, and especially to the dead. At the anointing of the corpse, the perfume on the head of Horus was especially sought after the placing on the head of the deceased. In Egypt, the burning of the various kinds of incense was an important part of any rite, as each ingredient had its own magical and mystical properties, in their worship of the sun god Ra. The Egyptians burnt incense to him 3 times during the course of the day. The first was as he rose in the morning, personified by the sun, when he was greeted by the burning of resin. The second time was when he stood at his zenith at noon, when he was offered myrrh. And lastly, as he sank to the west in the evening, when he was given the final offering of Kaifi. Okay. What are you doing? Oh. Hindu. The Hindu have always been fond of pleasant odors, and India was already celebrated for its perfumes in ancient times. Incense from Arabia was a very early import, but many native kinds of sweet-smelling materials have long been in use. Benzoin and other gum resins, seeds, roots, dried flowers, and fragrant woods. These materials are burned ritually in public or private in domestic usage. Perhaps one of the most popular items is sandalwood, used both in ancient times in the temple or the home, and in modern times as an ingredient in the incense sticks, which the export is in vast quantities. The Indian Dayanyal, or symbol in the Hindu Kush, attempts to gain temporary inspiration with the aid of sacred plants or trees. She places a cloth over her head and inhales the smoke from a fire that has been made with the twigs of the sacred cedar. She is seized with convulsions, falls to the ground senseless, and in this state she gives her prophecy. In modern Hinduism, the use of incense is fairly widespread in the cult of Shiva. It is burnt daily by the priest before the stone representing the god at Orissa, and perfumes are also placed upon it. Camphor and incense are burned before the image of Krishna. Jewish. The frequent references to incense in the Old Testament have given rise to the view that its use goes back to very early times among the Jews. In fact, the authorized version often used the word to refer to the aroma of the burnt offerings, and the ancient Hebrews may have regarded the use of incense so popular with the Babylonians as the myrrh trapping of idolatry. It was regarded at first in much the same way by the early Christian church, which associated its use with paganism. In fact, the misconception arises from the rendering of the word kelereth as incense when, strictly speaking, it means the savory smoke of burnt offerings. The word frankincense is meaning sweet resinous gum. These two Hebrew words at first were quite distinct in meaning. Through laterally, the first became synonymous with the second, thus also came to mean incense. Scholars now generally agree that the burning of incense was not introduced into the Judaic ritual until about the 7th century BC, once it was adopted. However, becoming more and more important in acts of worship, this first incense used was compounded of few ingredients, and its mixing by the priest was regarded with much the same reverence accorded to the manufacture of kafai by the Egyptians. It was burned with the meat offerings, and which the first fruits on its own, at morning and evening on a special altar, the altar of incense or incensers. It was taken once a year on the Day of Atonement inside the inner sanctum of the temple. Ezekiel, one of God's strengthens, makes no reference to incense in his description of the Reformed ritual. The first distinct reference to its use in the cult of Yahweh is in Jeremiah 6:20. To what purpose cometh there to me incense from Sheba, and that sweet cane from a far country? Some references in the biblical account show that incense is not required once it had been admitted. However, it came to be a regular part of the ritual and is very frequently cited in the priestly code. Incense was offered either by itself or as part of other sacrifices. It was burned in censers as on the Day of Atonement, when the high priest appeared before the mercy seat, Leviticus 16:12, or when Aaron passes through the congregation to stay the plague with his censer and incense, an act of atonement and fumigation, Numbers 16:46. Greek. It seems that the incense, in the sense of gums and resins as we know them, were not used by the Greeks until after the Homeric period. Pliny says that people knew only the smell of cedar wood and citrus as it rose in volumes of smoke from the sacrifice. The wood of odoriferous trees of cedar and myrtle was burned in houses for its fragrant smell. In common with others, the Greeks considered a sweet and fragrant odor as pleasant to the gods, thus making sacrifice and prayer more acceptable to them. Before the 8th century BC, incense as such was not used. Shader is of the opinion that it may have been introduced through the cult of Aphrodite, and it is certainly traditionally held to have come from Phoenicia through Cyprus, where it was used in her cult. It was imported into Greece as a commercial venture from Arabia at a later date. The word frankincense was a foreign derivation in accordance with the customs of other nations. It was burned with bloody sacrifices, both as an offering to the gods and a fumigation for the evil odors produced. It was offered with fruits, cakes, wheat, and so on, or on its own as a separate offering, both in the cult of the gods or in domestic ritual. In the cults of the gods, it was burnt to Zeus, Melucius, and Hermes, Sosipolis, and to Demeter before consulting the oracle at Patrae. Incense was quite often presented as a gift from one person to another. Large amounts were used as the inventory lists of some temples show. In the rites of certain divinities, it was offered with cake or honey, quite often without being burned. The incense was sometimes thrown on the altar so as to mingle with the smoke of the sacrifice. The sacrifice itself was often filled with incense before burning, or it was simply thrown onto braziers that were standing on or near the altar. It was even burnt outside the temple itself. It was naturally burnt in vessels that could be held in the hand. In the Ophiric cult, incense of many different kinds were used as the hymns show. Man, I need a drink.